in the merger that took place.
Which merger? You've listed many.
Involving American Express GBT. I understand that Brian Ballard, longtime backer and head of the law firm where you work, was instrumental in lobbying the Justice Department to drop that lawsuit. It was dismissed, so it's not subject to a court review. What conversation did you have with Mr. Ballard?
Senator Blumenthal, I cannot believe that you would accuse me of impropriety when you lied about your military service.
I am
you
not
lied.
asking
You
you.
admitted you
I am
lied
not
to be
accusing you
elected
of
a U.S. senator.
impropriety. I'm
You
asking
lied.
you
How
about
dare you? I'm a
conversations
career prosecutor.
with Mr.
Don't you
Ballard.
ever challenge my integrity.
Had
I have
apparently-
abided by every ethics standard. Do not question my ability to be fair and impartial as Attorney General, and anything
You'll
with
answer that
my
question to
former
another of my
firm,
colleagues.
Ballard Partners.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is absolutely massive, and I need you to understand exactly what just happened, because this is one of the biggest legal defeats the Trump administration has suffered since taking office. A federal judge just threw out, completely dismissed, the criminal cases against James Comey and Letitia James. Gone, done, over. And the judge did not just quietly dismiss these cases on some technicality. No. The judge issued a blistering opinion that basically called out Pam Bondi and the entire Justice Department for trying to game the system to go after Trump's political enemies. This is a humiliating defeat. This is the kind of ruling that exposes exactly what this administration has been trying to do with the Justice Department, and it proves what critics have been saying all along. These prosecutions were never about justice. They were about revenge. And now a federal judge has said so in an official court ruling that will be part of the legal record forever. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
You publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim.
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo.
Who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you.
There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
Let me break down what happened here, because the details are incredible. The Trump administration, through Attorney General Pam Bondi, brought criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Now, if those names sound familiar, they should. James Comey is the FBI director who Trump fired and who has been a constant critic of Trump ever since. Letitia James is the New York Attorney General who successfully prosecuted Trump's company for fraud and who has been one of his most aggressive legal adversaries. These are two people Trump has publicly attacked for years. These are two people Trump has openly said he wants to see punished. And now his Justice Department tried to criminally prosecute both of them. And a federal judge just said, no, absolutely not. You cannot do this. The way you did this was unlawful, and I am throwing out everything. Here's what the judge found. Bondi appointed a prosecutor named Lindsay Halligan as an interim United States attorney. And according to federal law, there are very specific rules about how interim appointments work. You can appoint someone on an interim basis, but only for a limited period of time, 120 days. After that, the person needs to be confirmed by the Senate. That is the constitutional requirement. The Senate has to give its advice and consent for these powerful positions. But what Bondi tried to do, according to the judge, was use rolling interim appointments to keep a loyalist in place without ever going through Senate confirmation. She was trying to bypass the Constitution. She was trying to install someone who would do what Trump wanted without having to answer to Congress. And what did this loyalist prosecutor do once she was installed? She went after Comey and Letitia James. She presented indictments to grand juries. She moved quickly to bring charges against two of Trump's favorite enemies. And the judge said all of it, every single action she took, was unlawful because her appointment itself was unlawful. You cannot just install whoever you want in these positions and have them prosecute whoever the president does not like. That is not how the American legal system works. That is not how the Constitution works. And Judge Cameron McGowan Curry made that absolutely clear in a ruling that legal experts are calling a stinging rebuke of the entire Trump Justice Department strategy. Now think about what this means. Trump and Bondi thought they were going to put James Comey on trial. They thought they were going to prosecute the Attorney General of New York. They thought they had finally figured out how to use the Justice Department as a weapon against their enemies. And instead, a federal judge put them on trial. A federal judge examined how they tried to bend the rules and game the system. A federal judge looked at their appointment strategy and said, this is unconstitutional. And now, instead of Comey and Letitia James facing criminal prosecution, Bondi and Trump are facing a humiliating public defeat that exposes exactly what they were trying to do. Bondi came out swinging after the ruling. She blasted the decision. She promised an immediate appeal. She insisted that Halligan was highly qualified and that the cases against Comey and James were legitimate. She attacked Comey and James as corrupt. But here is the thing. None of that matters if the appointment was unlawful. You can have the best case in the world with the most evidence imaginable, but if the prosecutor who brought the case was not lawfully appointed, then the whole thing gets thrown out. That is what happened here, and all of Bondi's angry statements cannot change that basic legal reality. So in this video, we are going to break down exactly what the judge ruled and why it is so devastating for the Trump administration. We are going to look at how this fits into the broader pattern of Trump's revenge prosecutions being rejected by the courts. We are going to examine what this means for Bondi's credibility and for the Justice Department going forward. And we are going to talk about the bigger picture, because this is not just about one ruling. This is about whether the president can use the Justice Department to punish his enemies. And right now, the courts are saying emphatically and repeatedly, no, he cannot. The revenge agenda is collapsing. The lawfare strategy is backfiring. And Trump and Bondi are learning the hard way that there are still limits to executive power in America. Let us get into it. All right, so let us really dig into this ruling, because the legal reasoning is important and it exposes exactly what Bondi and Trump were trying to do. The case centers on the appointment of Lindsay Halligan as an interim United States attorney. Now, in the federal system, U.S. attorneys are the chief prosecutors for their districts. They have enormous power. They decide who gets charged with crimes. They decide what cases to pursue. They are presidential appointees who normally require Senate confirmation. That confirmation process exists for a reason. It is a check on executive power. It ensures that the people holding these powerful positions have been vetted by the legislative branch and have the support of the Senate. But there is a provision that allows for interim appointments. If a U.S. attorney position becomes vacant, the Attorney General can appoint someone on an interim basis to keep things running while a permanent nominee goes through the confirmation process. However, and this is crucial, federal law limits how long these interim appointments can last. The statute says 120 days. After that, either the Senate confirms someone or the district court appoints an interim. The Attorney General cannot just keep rolling over interim appointments indefinitely to avoid the confirmation requirement. That would defeat the entire purpose of Senate confirmation. That would let the executive branch install whoever it wants in these powerful positions without any congressional oversight. And according to Judge Curry, that is exactly what Bondi tried to do. The ruling explains that Bondi used the interim appointment process not as a temporary bridge to a permanent nominee, but as a way to install a loyalist who would pursue specific prosecutions. Halligan was put in place, and immediately moved to bring charges against Comey and Letitia James. The speed with which she acted, combined with the political nature of the targets, raised serious red flags for the court. This did not look like a normal prosecution following the evidence wherever it led. This looked like a targeted effort to go after people the president wanted punished. The judge ruled that all actions flowing from Halligan's defective appointment must be thrown out. That includes the indictments against Comey and James. Those indictments were presented to grand juries by a prosecutor who was not lawfully in her position. Therefore, the indictments are void. It does not matter how strong the underlying evidence might be. It does not matter whether Comey or James actually did anything wrong. The process was corrupted from the start by an unlawful appointment. And once you corrupt the process, the results of that process cannot stand. Now let us talk about the broader context, because this ruling does not exist in isolation. It is part of a pattern of courts rejecting Trump administration efforts to use legal mechanisms for political revenge. We have seen judges block Trump executive orders targeting law firms that represented his opponents. Firms like Jenner and Block and Sussman Godfrey were targeted by the administration, and federal judges called those actions shocking and unconstitutional. We have seen courts dismiss Justice Department misconduct complaints against judges who ruled against Trump. We have seen appeals courts uphold massive penalties against Trump himself for filing frivolous lawsuits, including a $1 million penalty related to his lawsuit against Hillary Clinton that was deemed filed in bad faith. There is a clear pattern emerging here. Trump and his allies keep trying to use the legal system as a weapon. They keep trying to punish critics and reward loyalists. They keep trying to bend the rules to achieve political objectives. And courts keep saying no. Judges appointed by presidents of both parties keep looking at these efforts and concluding they are unlawful or unconstitutional or abusive. The revenge agenda that was supposed to be the centerpiece of Trump's second term is running into a wall of judicial resistance. And this Comey and James ruling is perhaps the most significant brick in that wall so far. Think about what Bondi and Trump were trying to accomplish. They wanted to put James Comey, the former FBI director, on trial. That would have been an incredible spectacle. The man who Trump fired and who Trump blames for the Russia investigation sitting in a courtroom as a criminal defendant. Trump's supporters would have loved it. It would have been presented as proof that the deep state was finally being held accountable. It would have been the ultimate revenge. And they wanted to prosecute Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, who beat Trump in court and won a massive fraud judgment against his company. Imagine that. A sitting state attorney general being criminally prosecuted by the federal government after she successfully prosecuted the president's business. The message would have been clear: to go after Trump, and Trump will come after you with the full power of the federal government. But instead of that spectacle, instead of those triumphant prosecutions, Bondi got humiliated in court. A federal judge examined how she tried to install a loyal prosecutor and said, "This is not how the American legal system works." The judge did not just dismiss the cases on narrow technical grounds. The judge issued an opinion explaining that using rolling interim appointments to avoid Senate confirmation would let the White House evade the constitutional requirement of advice and consent. That is serious language. That is a judge saying the Attorney General tried to circumvent the Constitution. That is not a technicality. That is a fundamental violation of how our system of government is supposed to work. And here is what makes this even more significant. Bondi cannot just refile these cases with a different prosecutor. The ruling creates serious problems for any attempt to resurrect these prosecutions. The evidence that was gathered and the grand jury proceedings that took place, all of that happened under an unlawfully appointed prosecutor. Can any of it be used going forward? That is a complicated legal question. And even if Bondi manages to get a lawfully confirmed prosecutor in place and tries to bring new charges, the defense will argue that the whole investigation was tainted from the start. The constitutional violation does not just disappear. It infects everything that came after. Bondi has promised to appeal, and she will almost certainly do so. But appeals take time, and the legal basis for this ruling is strong. The statute is clear about the 120-day limit. The constitutional requirement of Senate confirmation is well established, and the facts of the case, the way Halligan was installed and immediately went after high-profile Trump enemies, support the judge's conclusion that this was an attempt to game the system. Appellate courts may or may not agree with every aspect of the ruling, but the fundamental holding that you cannot use interim appointments to install loyalist prosecutors who bypass Senate confirmation is unlikely to be overturned. Okay, so let us break this down into what you really need to understand about this ruling and what it means for the Trump administration's legal strategy going forward. Because this is not just one case. This is a window into how the revenge agenda is collapsing and why courts are increasingly unwilling to let this administration use the Justice Department as a political weapon. First point. The ruling is a direct attack on the lawfulness of Bondi's approach. This is not a judge saying we disagree with the charges or we think the evidence is weak. This is a judge saying the prosecutor who brought these charges should not have been in that position in the first place. The appointment was unlawful. Therefore, everything that flowed from that appointment is unlawful. That is devastating. It means Bondi's entire strategy of using interim appointments to install loyalists is now under a legal cloud. Other cases brought by prosecutors appointed through similar mechanisms could face the same challenges. Defense attorneys across the country are probably already drafting motions citing this ruling. Second point, this exposes the political nature of these prosecutions. The judge did not explicitly say these cases were brought for political revenge, but the ruling makes clear that the court was deeply concerned about how the process was engineered to target specific political adversaries, the speed with which Halligan moved after being installed, the high-profile nature of the targets, the way the appointment process appeared designed to avoid Senate confirmation. All of it points to a prosecution strategy driven by political considerations rather than neutral application of the law. And that is exactly what critics have been saying about the Trump Justice Department since day one. Now, a federal judge has validated those concerns in an official court ruling. Third point, this is part of a broader pattern of judicial resistance to Trump's revenge agenda. The Comey and James dismissals are not isolated. We have courts blocking executive orders targeting law firms. We have courts dismissing misconduct complaints against judges who ruled against Trump. We have appeals courts upholding massive penalties against Trump for frivolous lawsuits. We have ruling after ruling saying that the administration is overreaching and that there are constitutional limits to what the executive branch can do. The revenge agenda that Trump promised, the idea that he would use the power of the presidency to punish everyone who wronged him, is running into the reality that we have an independent judiciary that does not answer to the president. And so far, that judiciary is doing its job. Fourth point, Bondi's credibility is seriously damaged. She was already facing questions about her independence after Trump accidentally posted that message about prosecuting his enemies. She was already facing calls for removal from some members of Congress. And now she has suffered a humiliating defeat in one of the most high-profile prosecutions her department attempted. A federal judge basically said she tried to circumvent the Constitution to install a loyal prosecutor. That is not a good look for an attorney general. That is not what you want on your record. And it gives ammunition to everyone who says Bondi is not running an independent Justice Department. She is running Trump's personal law firm with the resources of the federal government. Fifth point, this does not mean Comey and Letitia James are completely in the clear forever. Bondi will appeal. The administration might try to bring new charges through a lawfully appointed prosecutor. The legal fight could continue for months or years, but for now, right now, both of them have won. The criminal cases against them have been thrown out. They are not facing trial. They are not looking at possible prison time. And they can point to a federal court ruling that says the prosecutions against them were brought unlawfully. That is vindication. That is a win. And it is a loss for Trump and Bondi, no matter how they try to spin it. So what happens next? Bondi will file her appeal. Legal experts will analyze the ruling and debate whether it will be upheld. The political fight will continue, with both sides claiming victory in their own way. Trump supporters will say, this is just another example of the deep state protecting its own. Critics will say, this proves the prosecutions were always about revenge rather than justice, and the courts will continue doing their job, evaluating these cases on the law and the facts, rather than on political considerations. But here is what I want you to take away from this story. The system is working, imperfectly, slowly, with lots of noise and drama, but it is working. When the executive branch tries to abuse its power, when the Justice Department tries to prosecute people for political revenge rather than legitimate law enforcement purposes, courts can and do step in, judges can and do say no, the Constitution can and does provide limits. That does not mean everything is fine. That does not mean we can be complacent. But it does mean that the checks and balances the founders built into our system are not completely broken. They are being tested, they are under stress, but they're still functioning. Trump and Bondi thought they could use the Justice Department to destroy their enemies. They thought they had figured out how to game the appointment process and install loyalists who would do their bidding. They thought James Comey and Letitia James would be sitting in courtrooms facing criminal charges. Instead, a federal judge examined what they did and said, this is unlawful, this is unconstitutional, this will not stand. And now it is Trump and Bondi who are facing judgment, not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion and in the historical record. This ruling will be cited for years. It will be part of the permanent record of this administration, and it will stand as proof that even the most powerful people in the country cannot simply ignore the Constitution when it becomes inconvenient for their revenge fantasies. I will be back with more updates as the appeal progresses and as this story continues to develop, because it will develop. Bondi is not going to take this lying down. Trump is not going to quietly accept defeat. The legal battle will continue. But for now, for today, the courts have spoken. And what they said is that there are limits, there are rules, there is a constitution, and no one, not even the president and his attorney general, is above the law. Stay tuned.